Okay, we're going to plan C. We're going to have a round table. Wait a minute, give the other rule. Or do you want to just let people stand like this?
Just want to come by and show you the plan.
Oh, yes, sir. Why you stand for that, right?
Well, I believe these.
All day long.
That's Jesus, like
Oh, better cover all stuff, relax.
John, they do it.
Yeah, I just real hope we can do something. Make it a little beautification, you know.
We're going to try to
Let's see here. Tell you what I good
They're not
Yeah, a lot of it. Yeah, just send it in anywhere you'd like. Hi, I'm Jim Reynolds, Director of Public Works. I'm the staff liaison to the Riverwalk Subcommittee. Subcommittee is a subcommittee of the Central Business Area Task Force. This is our first formal get-together tonight. We've had 3 Riverwalk meetings that were kind of informal as they were walkthroughs during the summer to get people acquainted with the potential route of this potential project. We've got the consultants out in force tonight, and I just want to put a plug in for them. This is not billable hours. They're here of their own volition tonight, and they came out in force. So I'm going to turn it over to Nick in a minute, but there is a sign-in sheet circulating. I'd appreciate it if you filled in your name and address, and we'll keep you on the mailing list if you're not already there. HARS has got a number with Lakota, a number of illustrations and concepts tonight. They're going to give us maybe a 45-minute overview presentation. The individual players will have 5 or 7 minutes up there. Then we want to open this up to a kind of a roundtable discussion group. And we don't know if we're going to have one big roundtable or maybe 2 or 3 small ones. We want to encourage discussion. Throw out your ideas, pros, cons, things that may have been overlooked. We're just looking for concepts and feelings here, how people view this, and if they think there are other opportunities. There's many challenges ahead. We don't know what's going to come out of this. The board will likely, once this is all said and done, we have a final report in December, elect to go to a referendum to determine what, if anything, we're going to do. They're going to give you some ideas tonight. Anyway, I'd like to introduce to you Nick Panzik from HARSA. Nick's our project manager here, and it's all his show right now.
Thank you, Jim. Actually, it's your show, folks. I hope everybody picked up an agenda for tonight's workshop. Before we start, I'd just like to introduce the consultant team, and I am pleased to see that we are now finally outnumbered by the residents. From right to left, John Villan with HARSA Environmental Services. He is our project sponsor. To his left is Tony Wolf, our project engineer with HARSA. Under the clock, John Lamott with the Lakota Group. Standing to his right is Scott Freres, also with the Lakota Group. And seated in front of Scott is David Meeks with the Lakota Group. So as Jim indicated, we're here in force tonight. And we really want to use this as an interactive process to get your input to the design process. At this point in the study, we're about 1/3 of the way through the overall feasibility study process. This initial schematic design phase is meant to be a preliminary but comprehensive look at the Riverwalk project. And as you'll see in a few moments, we're going to present to you 3 basic concept levels. The minimal level is, it will not have a Riverwalk. It will address primarily the issues of the river itself, that being stream bank erosion and channel improvements that are needed regardless of whether any type of Riverwalk project goes forward. And Tony Wolf will address those issues. Moving up in concept and cost, we will present a minimalist Riverwalk scheme. It will include the basic river improvements, but will then add on a basic Riverwalk, and Scott Fresh from the Lakota Group will present that information. And then also for your consideration, we have a sort of a maximal scheme, and this is the one that's going to be the most architecturally significant, will be the most costly of the schemes, but we wanted to get feedback on people's thoughts on that approach as well. I'll wrap up the presentation by running through some of the cost estimates to give you an idea of where the dollars are, and then we'll break into our workshop group and get some very specific feedback and input from you as a group. So bear with us for about half an hour as we present our program here. Now I'll turn things over to John Lamott, and John will just talk a little bit about how the workshop portion is going to work.
What I'd like to do is just quickly remind everybody that this is the first draft kind of preliminary stage, and the workshop is intended to be just that, a workshop, a lot of brainstorming, a lot of ideas can come out. If you want to paint the streets purple, let's put it out on the list. If you want to put a dome over downtown, let's put it on the list. And again, we're emphasizing, while you're going to see some nice designs and ideas, this is really the first draft. So once we get done with our presentation, we'd like to either stay in one group, depending on what you'd like to do, or maybe break into two groups, and just give you a chance to look closely at the drawings, mark them up, throw tomatoes, bring up more ideas as we go along. So we'll do that in about a half hour, 45 minutes. So next, Tony's going to start to walk you through where we are with existing conditions and some of the initial ideas to get that going. And is he passing something out there? Yeah, we'll get that. And Tony, if you can keep the mic down, I think, because getting a little bit of a feedback.
Thanks, John. We'd like to start tonight just talking about some of the existing conditions of the river, the way it stands now, and the reason we're even looking at any of this work. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the river itself through downtown Northbrook, and have seen the erosion along the stream banks and some of the less than nice appearance of the different areas of the river. Over here, a map showing different heights of erosion, as well as outfall structures, storm sewer outfall structures that are in need of repair. And Scott is handing out smaller versions of this map. The difference in erosion heights is important because when we go into developing some treatment plans for the shorelines, there are several different methods of treatment that can be used depending on the severity of the erosion and the overall condition. So what we've done here is tried to color code the severity of the erosion. You can see starting up at the top, if everybody's got their drawings, at the north by Cherry Lane, the erosion up there is not so bad. We've broken it down into 3-foot segments. What we're saying up here is that there's about 0 to 3 feet of erosion depth up there. In reality, there's nothing really less than about 2 feet. This entire stretch of river is fairly eroded. And as we move down, it gets worse and worse as we move down here. This blue section is about 4 to 6 feet, and these red sections represent about 7 to 9 feet of erosion. So there's some pretty high levels. If you actually stood down in the bed of the river there, you'd be looking up at how far these banks have eroded. There are several issues, of course, besides erosion that we're looking at. We've got this board here I can throw up, and I hope that this board will include most of the issues that anyone in this room would be concerned with as far as this project is concerned. You can see we've got the stream bank stabilization and erosion control as the #1 issue, because regardless of whether there's a Riverwalk built, we're hoping that something can be done about this. And rather than go through each of these items one by one, I think you'll see that as we move along through the presentation, we'll be touching on each of these items. And then when we break into our groups, this will be kind of a checklist to see if each of you are satisfied with or what ideas you may have on each of these topics. We have some photos here also to show the conditions that I'm talking about as far as erosion and sediment buildup and debris buildup. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see the captions here, but a few of these pictures are pretty graphic as far as, tree roots just coming out, sticking out of the ground where the soil has been washed away. And of course, these trees are not going to last too much longer that way. There have been some efforts in the past to start controlling this erosion by some wood sheet piling. There's several instances of this failing already, so that needs to be looked at. There's a couple of pretty severe cases of erosion along the parking lots near the bank by Meadow Road, and also behind that Little Louise and that area there. Here, we've got a couple of pictures of some storm sewer outfalls deteriorated quite bad. You can see a couple of them here next to the failing stabilization measures there, and another, actually this is one of the same. These are near the Meadow Road Bridge, and this one here is behind the Sunset Foods. There are several of these. These are just a couple of them, but there are, I would say 8 to 10 of these in this stretch of river that would need to be looked at, repaired, possibly replaced. So we've got our erosion, our outfall repair. A couple of these pictures are showing sediment buildup underneath the Metro Bridge or the Shermer Road Bridge. What we would want to do there is go in and clear those areas out, more for channel stability than anything else. If we can kind of stabilize the shape of the channel here, and then go ahead with our shoreline protections, we'll be in much better shape. Also, if we do go ahead with the Riverwalk, most likely we would have to go under the Metro Bridge there, which would mean we would definitely need to clear out those areas and get down to a level ground. So that takes us in our issues board here that as far as river hydraulics and floodway, the main thing there is regarding permitting. We can't really do anything that's going to affect the hydraulics of the river or increase the flood level. So whatever we do, whatever actions we take, if it's going to affect any of that, we have to take some kind of a counteraction to bring it back to the state it's in now, as far as the flood level and river hydraulics. And like I said, the rest of these issues, will be touched on as we move along. What I'd like to do next then is move along to our actual treatment plan. The other graphic that I've handed out. Again, it's a color-coded map, and we've got 6 basic treatments that we're considering to be used along this stretch of river. As I said earlier, the less severe erosion can use a little bit easier or less expensive type of treatments, where the more severely eroded areas are going to require something a little more structural and sturdy. The idea here was to try and stay with what's called bioengineering treatments, which is mostly plants. You can use plants and their roots will grow through the soil and kind of tie the soil together to help prevent that soil from eroding. But some of those real lightweight planting strategies can really only be used for something less than these 2 to 3 feet or 4 feet of erosion that we're looking at least in most cases. So this stretch up here that we said wasn't so bad, what we're considering here is something called an herbaceous vegetation with dark stone and fiber roll treatment. And what this consists of This fiber roll is comprised of coconut fibers tightly wound into a log. This log can be anywhere from 6 to 12 feet long and about a foot in diameter. This log is then laid right at about the water level, the normal water level. You want it generally to be about 2/3 submerged in the water. What will happen is as this becomes submerged, or as this becomes saturated with water, it becomes very heavy and acts as a support or a block to keep the ground from eroding away. And within that log are some plantings of either some type of willow plantings or herbaceous plantings that will, over time, will grow and the roots will grow down into the ground, and after about 5 to 7 years or so, this fiber roll itself will biodegrade away to nothing. But what you'll be left with are these, this vegetation that has taken hold and has tied up the soil, and then you'll have this herbaceous vegetation also up the rest of the slope, some type of grass or ragweed or something like that. Down at the bottom, underneath the fiber roll, you just have some dark stones to try and keep the roll in place until it really takes hold. We say dark stones just because we want this to be, as less intrusive as possible. We don't want it to look like there's really been a ton of work done here. We want it to look as natural as it can be so that it's an appealing thing for people to see. As we move down towards the metro tracks, maybe some of you have seen, there's a very steep slope on the side of the tracks with mostly dead vegetation in there. Most likely this is due to some chemicals that Metro uses to keep the vegetation off the tracks, and sometimes will run down the hillside. So what we've proposed in here, the erosion is a little bit worse and the slope is fairly steep, is something called interplanted boulder and stone. It's a little more sturdy and secure than the herbaceous vegetation with fiber roll, and what it consists of are some large boulders down at the bottom with some plantings intermingled that again, these plantings the roots will take hold and tie up the soil. And then just a few stones above the boulders, and then just along here we would just try and replace the dead vegetation that's there with some new herbaceous grass and some nice looking vegetation to look at, and if the Riverwalk is ever actually developed. As we move down here, we need something a lot stronger because the hydraulics of the river say that as we go through this bend, the water is going to be really forcing itself onto this bend here on the outside of this bend. And so there's going to be some very strong erosive forces there. So what we're proposing is something called a gabion wall, which basically it's just wire baskets filled with fairly large stones. They become very heavy. We're talking about 12 feet long, and then 3 feet wide and 3 feet high, and then they're stacked almost like steps. Okay, they can weigh as much as 10,000 pounds for each one of these baskets. So they're very sturdy. On the opposite side, what we're proposing here is a stone wall. The idea here is that if we do go ahead with the Riverwalk, it possibly would come under the Metro Bridge on this side, and then we would want some kind of a wall there to protect the walk from water, to keep it away as the people are going through. And the stone wall is kind of a nicer thing for people to look at as they're walking, and also keep the water away. As we come under the Metro Bridge and move on to Meadow Road, again we're looking at the interplanted boulder and stone, and then in this next section after the Meadow Road, we come to a little more severe erosion, where we have to start introducing some sheet piling. possibly. What we're looking at right now is something, it's a vinyl sheet piling, if possible. It's a little more attractive than steel sheet piling. You can get it in different colors. It's, it's very strong still. And you can cover it with some different types of things to make it look fairly as natural as possible. That's the brown section here. The purple sections are just using cobblestones down at the foot of the bank to basically it serves the same purpose as the cobbles here with the fiber roll, but we're not introducing any vegetation here with the idea that again, if we go ahead to a river walk, this may be more of an urban type development with the shopping plaza here and the shopping area over here. Scott, when he talks about his Riverwalk developments, will go through the possible different, maybe a natural theme here and an urban theme here and a natural theme there.
Any questions here? At the end, once we get into the recap. Okay.
So we've got the cobbles and the sheet piling here. And over here, again, we go back to the interplanted boulder and stone as much as possible. That's kind of the strongest vegetative treatment that we can think of to use. So we want to use that as much as possible and avoid the sheet piling and avoid the stone walls and the gabion walls. So that's what we're using all along here, along the backyards of the residences. On this side, however, the erosion is quite severe, and we've gone with the sheet piling with the idea, too, that the Riverwalk would possibly be going along this side and could then just be right at the top of the sheet piling. So that's the idea for treatments, and I think at this point it's probably time to move on to Scott Ferris, who will tell you about the two Riverwalk alternatives.
Thanks, Tony. Before I get started with the alternatives, I want to quickly go through our analysis of how we really viewed the river. And this is a little bit different than Tony's analysis. Obviously, there's erosion control, and that's a major part of this process. But to get to the river walk part of this process, which is much more the aesthetic pedestrian environment as opposed to the functional, resolve the issues of erosion, we took a pass through this whole space and tried to define each of the areas or each of the reaches of the river as to what its character was. And that'll help us define, and whether we go in a minimum scheme, maximum scheme, no scheme at all, what kind of treatments or what kind of image each of these parts of the river should have. Obviously, it's a linked river walk. It's going to all be connected. But as you go through different portions of this river, there's clearly a different feel to the river, and that should be accentuated rather than try to fight it in terms of designing some sort of river walk system. First, most important was the river runs through this town, but nobody knows it when they're coming through or driving by or walking by because you can't see it. It's below you. You drive over it. The only reason you know there's a river there is because you go over a bridge, but even the bridges themselves are pretty heavy and hard, and you really don't notice that there's water below them. Very few of them have open railing that look down at the river. One of the very first things that we noticed that was important in terms of the overall length of this river walk was establishing gateways, gateway opportunities, areas where you could get to the river, areas that signed or identified areas to get down to the river, or merely elements, as we'll talk about a little bit later, that are special lighting, special features, or something that identifies, whether it's a little plaque or a banner or whatever, that the river is here. This is the river, this is where you get on the river walk, or this is just a place to look out over the river and overlook. We've identified those up at what we call a village arterial, Cherry, that brings a lot of traffic into the downtown. Again, at the other village arterial, which we were defining as Shermer Road, that brings everybody into the downtown. A crossing or a gateway opportunity along Meadow, much more lower density road. Although there's a lot of traffic on it, its scale is probably bigger in terms of what it needs to be in terms of the amount of traffic that's actually moving through it. And again, another gateway opportunity at the very southeasternmost end of the site down by the doctor's office, St. Norbert's down there in the museum. Another gateway opportunity at the end of the park. Critical points, something should happen at these areas in one shape or another to identify the points to get to the river or to see the river. Then walking through this space, we really kind of started up at the opportunity for, assume that you get on this at the parking for the library. Well, we have the new library expansion over here that really lends itself to an opportunity to establish some sort of what we call the educational or environmental zone of the river. There's already some treatments planned as part of the library expansion, as part of the parking lot and the shoreline of those areas, and we saw that as an opportunity to identify maybe reading gardens. We saw this as more of a passive zone, much more naturalistic in whatever type of approach we take there, whether it's a river walk, stream bank erosion as the treatments that Tony talked about, and or just the overall quality. This doesn't need to be a hard edge. As you move further to the south, you're walking towards the public works facility, towards the water tower, and you're almost to the Metro Bridge. This is obviously the stormwater detention area, the open ball fields. Again, a much more naturalistic character. It has another opportunity as it leads itself back to the Village Hall for a gateway right on axis of the little walkway that's right out here to the between the library and the Village Hall. Nice little axis that will take you right to a point and get you into the system, so to speak, of a river walk, which is part of this detention area in the ball field. We have, as we're walking along, we have some concern areas. One of them is this defoliated embankment that's along the train tracks. It's unsightly one, but it obviously has some severe erosion. That's an issue that we need to take care of. We also, as you start turning the corner to move your way to underneath the metro tracks, you've got a little bit of a view shed problem looking back towards the public works and the water tower. Obviously not a lot that can be done in terms of enhancing the buildings or the facilities, but there could be some screening opportunities in terms of landscaping in these areas that we could deter your view away from those facilities and towards the river itself. As you go under the metro, and I'm walking through the scenario of how I'd actually traverse this space, we get to the railroad history zone that we're defining. And as we do that, we start to get into a much more urban edge riverfront. As we move further in behind the kind of the retail core of downtown, we get into a much more urban context history zone as well. And both of these zones are ones that we've thought of as being much more hard-edged, areas where the erosion is severe enough that we're really going to need some strong treatments in terms of retaining walls and or the treatments Tony talked about, gapping walls. Areas that we can do some really neat things with streetscape, incorporating streetscape, what's already been done in the downtown, but also incorporating it into this Riverwalk area, drawing people to this, making this a feature of the downtown, not just the backs of the stores, not just the loading docks at the back of the stores, and really make this the centerpiece that everybody sees in terms of identifying the Riverwalk in Northbrook. As you go down a little bit further, you get behind the doctor's offices. We've got a lot of issues back in here, some of which are poor views, obviously, some of which are screening views from the backs of the shopping centers, one of which is this parking lot area. And the parking lot area is a critical component of the retail. We understand that. We also got the sense from numerous visits out here and just from a little bit of feedback, and parking's always a big issue in any situation, regardless of what you do in downtowns, that part of this parking area, as much as it's used, there's part of it that really feels like it's underutilized and just not being utilized to its potential. Maybe an issue of striping, maybe an issue of its alignment, circulation, parking islands, what have you. But we really found that kind of this back corner over here is just being a no man's land back there, depressed, kind of caving in with the river in its own right, and an opportunity as opposed to a liability, so to speak. Moving eastward, again, poor views, a lot of noise back here as the trucks are starting to turn around and load back into Sunset Foods. But right on the end back here, through the brush, through the debris, if you get yourself a view back in there, and we do a little bit of clearing on the opposite side, there's a nice little view opportunity into what we've defined as the cloister garden area of the Presbyterian Church. Nice little garden space back there. Don't want to bring people into it, obviously, but it would be nice to get a view and utilize that as part of the Riverwalk as some sort of advantage point off of this corner here. Again, gateway opportunity. As we go by this bridge, we have the opportunity, and I should note that right now, that we can go under that bridge. We can't go underneath the bridge on Meadow Lane. There's just not enough head clearance. There's just not enough bank erosion. That means we're going to have to come back up again and cross the street at this point. We go under here. We can go under the Metro Track. We can't go under a Cherry. Again, head clearance, water level clearance, issue of road crossing there. We put the big arrow here saying future link. It's questionable how we make that link, how it's done to make it safe for people to actually use it and cross Cherry Lane. This is a major road, and there's a lot of sightline issues that need to be addressed as part of this in terms of going underneath the Metro Viaduct at this point. But a great link, nonetheless, that should be investigated in the future to link up towards the Forest Preserve area. Going to the, starting to make the turn on Shermer, and now we're going down. We've got the existing trail here, which is already our river walk, so to speak, behind all of the village green there, and behind the ball fields, and back behind the gazebo, and then down to what's really kind of a little anchor at our southern end, the History Museum, or was it Bartholomew's, or whatever it used to be, the old stopping grounds. But this is the Historical Museum. It's a good place to have on a river walk. Many communities don't have that when they're establishing it. We've got some anchors that are already on this. We've got the library, the cultural context. We've got the History Museum on the south end, the Historical Society. We've got all these little retail components. We've got a church. We've got all these elements, the village green. We just don't have the link yet. So we've got all the elements you need to have in terms of the infrastructure and land uses around it, but we don't have the link. Going through this area, the other concern here is the natural condition, the park and recreation zone. That's kind of an obvious. It should be left in a naturalized condition. It should have a meandering path of some sort through that space. We really also would like to incorporate or foster the idea that on the other side of the bank that there's some sort of green park-like atmosphere on the other side of the bank, because there is erosion on both sides, on the private property owner side as well as the side that is adjacent to the park. And both of them should be treated and addressed the same way, whether they're naturalized, whether there's some natural solutions to erosion. Those are things that we like to see happen in terms of the context of that space. Getting into the minimum, maximum schemes. The minimum scheme, I'm just going to paraphrase this, that all of these schemes have the erosion control issues that Tony mentioned in one shape or another. Those are necessary evils that have to occur because of the conditions of the bank and the condition of the river itself, not because we absolutely have to have any one of those in any of these areas to make a river walk work. But I will say that in some of these instances, additional retaining, additional structural components need to be integrated in order to make a river walk work. And those may be in the form of a retaining wall, those may be in the form of a boardwalk or a raised platform, they may be in the form of a bridge crossing the river, they may be in the form of an asphalt pathway or a brick pathway, and we have a number of different options. But they would be required in order to make this river walk work, not because we have to contain the bank, but because we have to contain the walk. The walk can't just run on a slope that goes on a thing. It has to be level. In order to make it level along some of these bank spaces, we need to create retaining walls and or structures. And that was why I paraphrased that we saw an urban context and we saw a naturalistic context, because as we create these structures, they need to work within that context. We can't put in a solid concrete wall behind the library and expect that to look naturalistic and educational in intent. We can put something like that behind the parking lot here, where we're really trying to create a river walk with the promenade and the lights and banners flowing down the sidewalk. The minimum scheme, starting off of the library, really using that as the catalyst for this, the connections here. We've got a path that comes off of Cherry Lane. And I should note that these paths that we're showing on here are very simplistic. They are a paved path. We're looking at, in most instances in the minor scheme, asphalt connections, boardwalk connections, a synthetic wood or a recycled wood product instead of using real wood, so it can look like a boardwalk but last forever as opposed to replacing it. And we're also looking at opportunities for special paving, decorative pavers, bricks, reflecting on some of the history of the village as a brick-making community, that those be incorporated in special areas, overlooks, seating pockets, landings, but only in those areas in this minimal scheme. Asphalt walk, little path coming off the parking lot, a bridge connection or a footbridge connection. Something we have to get people across the river from the parking lot to the library. It's an expense in the minimum scheme, but it was the expense at the one location we thought that was necessary to do it in this particular scheme, to get people back to this connection between the village hall, to the library, to the cultural institutions, and along this ridge or along this high point over here of the berm before it dips down into the ball field over here. We also saw a little connection riding along the edge of the river on its west bank along here, and that just kind of runs along the length. It's a relatively even low grade. There's really no great slopes in this space. You can just run that path along there. We've got little, and I hope you can see this on the plan and follow along with me. We've got little water rapid features or riffle structures that are just really just large stones or limestones that are placed in the water to create movement when the water is at certain levels, so that there is some interest in these spaces. We've shown plantings here, minimal plantings in order to accommodate aesthetics, in order to accommodate naturalistic groupings of plants and some sort of natural feature here. We're not going to the maximum scheme, which we'll talk about in a minute, to make this look like an urban oasis. This is just landscaping to accentuate some of these areas, to fill in some of the blank spots, to refoliate the metro embankment, albeit that's something we have to work out with Metro because they're the ones who clear-cut all the stuff in the first place for their reasons. But we need to add some landscaping in here, but really from a minimal standpoint. We get to a point that is it's, immediately adjacent to going underneath the Metro tracks, just downslope of the Public Works and the water tower facility here, and now we're still on the lower bank. We have a little retaining wall structure that's going to have to keep us above high water mark along this area. On the back side of that retaining structure is a little boardwalk that wraps around and takes you underneath what would be the south side of the Metro tracks. This is the minimal scheme, but in order to make this minimal scheme work without having another bridge in this area and crossing over, we got to do a little bit more clearing, a little bit more retaining underneath the south side of the Metro tracks. It's actually the harder side to traverse underneath because there's water that flows on this side of the river. The north side of that embankment is relatively all silted in materials and stuff that we can actually build on top of or excavate a little bit to build a walk. Easier to go on the north side, but requires another bridge, more expense. So the minimum scheme comes along this side. It runs again along. There's a little flat landing on the other side of the tracks, right adjacent to the bank, and it slowly makes its way up that slope from this point all the way up to Meadow Road as a kind of a boardwalk structure with a railing on the side. And that is in order to create some sort of handicap accessibility within these two reaches of the river. In order to create that long, gentle slope that's required to have handicap accessibility, about a 1 in 12 slope with a landing at every 30 feet, I think it is, for slopes of this length, we have to create an area that's just a long, gentle slope. There's no little switchbacks, there's no stairs, it's just one gentle slope that comes up here. In order to do that, that's going to require some clearing of trees, it's going to require some replanting of a few trees in those areas, but again, this is going to be kept in a pseudo-naturalistic context, starting to get a little bit more urban as you get over towards Meadow Road. At Meadow Road, simply a designated crossing area, a space that's marked with a place for pedestrians across, big white stripes or what have you, nothing fancy, no pavers at this point, no decorative banners or lights or anything. I should say that there will be lights along this trail at given vantage points for safety and security reasons, but this won't be like a promenade with lights every 100 feet with banners hanging off of them. This is just a simple walk through this space. As you come across across Meadow Lane, we've got the parking lot situation. And in this particular instance, we've done as little impact to the existing parking lot the way it is as possible. There are areas along the outer edge where we've encroached 3, 4, 5 feet into the space. We may lose 1 or 2 car spots along this area, but that is what's remotely necessary just to get the bare minimum of a path along there. This means we're still up at the high edge of the bank. We're not going down to the bottom yet. We're still running along here, and in this area, again, it's just a simple asphalt path, a little overlook at the midpoint, maybe some decorative pavers there, continuing along down, and at this point right here, we start going down the slope because we absolutely have no space to work with behind the bank, or behind the doctor's offices over there. The drive comes in, there's diagonal parking right up against this whole space, and there's literally no space up at the top curb to keep the walk. So we're going to start coming down, slowly go underneath Shermer Road. at this particular area. There's no overlooks here. There's all the erosion control treatments that we talked about. That's still there. The opposite side, again, is a strong wall feature. It would probably, or more than likely, be some sort of vinyl sheet piling along there, but it would be revegetated, just not to any great extent, meaning that we have natural gardens and prairie plantings along that space. There'd be new tree plantings and some mid-story plantings to replicate some sort of greenery along that backside. In all schemes, we've identified some sort of screening, some sort of solid screening in terms of a fence at the top of that slope to really screen off the back of the service doors to the retail. As you come a little bit further south, you come underneath the river, and there's plenty of room underneath this bridge to get through. This is really the one that has the most head clearance underneath it, even at its high water mark. As you come across, you quickly realize that you have to come across and get back up right away, or you can have a pedestrian crossing that comes across the street. It really wouldn't make a difference at that particular point, but we do have the ability to come down or go underneath it. This is shown as either or. We connect up to the existing path system that's out there. Minimal interruption, what's actually occurring out there, minimal expense in putting in a whole new stretch of walkway in that area. New plantings as part of the retrofitting of some of the retaining or some of the erosion control. There's some infill plantings. There's a couple little overlook areas and maybe a couple rock outcroppings along there just to create a naturalistic sense in the space. And then just a continuation of that path up into the end when you get to Walters on the far south end. So this is a walk, and it's purely meant to be just a place that you can walk, see the river, walk along the river stop. There are none of the bells and whistles of a San Antonio Riverwalk in this scheme. The next scheme, we get into the bigger, the vision or the dream plan. And when we do these, we try and put everything in that we can think of, regardless of cost impacts, only because we'd rather throw the ideas out and get them out on the table. You can always go backwards and think of ways to do them cost effectively, but just to get the ideas out there and really think through what the vision should be if we really had the open checkbook, so to speak, to do this. We have the connection we talked about up at the north end. In these instances now, this is one of our gateway portals up here. At every bridge crossing on this particular scheme, we want to identify those bridge crossings. Some ways we can do that, we can easily use color. We can paint the railings a different color. We can develop, and we've got some ideas over here, and I'll walk through those in a second. We can develop plaques or banners that say Riverwalk, embed those into the support columns for the railings. We can mount light piers on top of the railings so that as you go over bridges at night, all the bridges are lit as you go over the river. Wonderful thing. A lot of communities use that all over the world. We also have introduced a archway at the entrance to the path, or 2 columns, or 2 lights, whatever it is. It would be a gateway element, something that you pass through that says, I'm going on the Riverwalk. And that little archway occurs up here along Cherry Road, and now all of a sudden you're on the Riverwalk. Again, you're walking through this space. It's an asphalt path, but now we've got these little bump out nodes here, these little reading pockets. Those little reading pockets are just little decorative paved areas, little outcropping stones. They're like the ones that are out on Cherry Road, the big landing stones, the irregular weather edge ledge rock that's out there. And they're just little sitting rocks so you can sit on, read a book, sit out in the sun away from the library, the shade of the library. All this area is planted with a low profile, kind of a wet mesic prairie mix that would really create kind of a naturalistic, colorful edge along that whole bank site. Real naturalistic, great place to sit out and read a book or what have you. There is a connection back to the park, lots of landscaping around that space. We've introduced a lot more ornamental trees out here and mid-story trees, clump trees. As you pass through the space, before you even cross the bridge, again, there's another little seating pocket back in this little corner here. If you just keep going a little bit further towards the metro tracks, there's a little seating area back there that we've created. And that, again, could be a little reading pocket, a little outdoor study area, a place to bring the kids out from the library on educational classes and look out over the river and discuss riverine topics. There are We've introduced in this plan a lot more mid-story, shrub story plantings along the banks to really naturalize this. And this is obviously a conceptual plan, but we're trying to show that there's a different level of planting to this scheme, that there's much more involvement in terms of the character and condition that occurs here. Here we've got the bridge coming across, hitting the library, a little decorative paving pocket as you go up to the steps to the library parking lot area to get to the library. This walk now continues all the way around, connects to what would be our focal promenade between the library and the village hall. This is a direct connection into the system. That gateway we talked about might be a little kiosk here, and those kiosks would say library 500 feet this way, retail shopping area, museum, village green. Might be directional markers for people who are walking through the space to know how far they have to go to the next element. There might also be along the trail little identification markers talking about species of plant materials or the type of flora and fauna that exist in the river or once had been in this area many years ago. There may be vestiges along the history part where we have little plaques that say Northbrook was once home to brick manufacturing facilities, and those facilities occurred here, here, and here, and we have little historic plaques. So those are the kind of elements that you're going to see all through this walkway. This walk continues around the edge of the high part of the berm. It kind of comes into the berm or the slope on this side and has to be kind of finagled in terms of regrading some of that slope in order to do that. We also have the low waterfront slope. We've got both of them in this scheme. This one really brings people from the outside into the system. This one just keeps people walking along the edge of the water. Rifle structures are little water structures that keep the water flowing, making a little bit of noise and movement as you go through the area. A lot more revegetation as you go through this space over in here. And as you get down to this little corner right here, there's two paths to take. The first path takes you across the river at this point. The second path brings you up the slope to a little promontory right from 50 water tower, and that's a little overlook point. You're up at a high point, and you can look back north, you can look down to the river slightly to the south. You got the metro track kind of blocking your view there. But you also have a lot more landscaping behind this little overlook that really creates the feeling that you're not looking at the water tower behind you or the back of the garage that's adjacent here and all that exposed paved surfaces where the trucks come in and get serviced in that. We've also taken that whole slope, and I don't know how many of you realize it's there, but it's just that in there. It really needs to be cleaned up. There is a solution to clean it up as part of our erosion plan, and that's nice and that's cost effective and that's an engineered way. But we thought, hey, this is a really neat area. Some major rock outcropping and maybe create a water aeration feature or a water movement feature where we bring water down that slope across all the rocks to create noise. You're sitting on a water wall going down to the water. We've got to retain it, we've got to fix it anyhow, but we can just keep recirculating water in that area and really make a feature, hear the noise, see the rapids kind of coming off and down the river at that point. You cross the river, cross the bridge, you're on a little boardwalk. It's retained. It means there's on the boardwalks lower than was holding that high water mark that you're walking on. You come underneath, said was the good side of the river, the easy side to cross over. That's the north side. And immediately come to a little flat point, and then you cross back over again, another bridge. So we've got two bridges here and one bridge here. Already you can see that just to get to these more maximum schemes, you're adding more of these features. But they're features nonetheless, and they're nice features that create the feeling of walking through a really riverwalk space. You cross the river, again we have the boardwalk that traverses its way, again revegetated in this area, and back up to Meadow Lane. Should note that all through these spaces we've got the decorative street lights, so the decorative pedestrian lighting every 100 feet, every 110 feet or so, and at critical points where you're going to cross under a bridge for safety and security. You come back up across, here's the drive out, or the drive-through for the bank in this particular area. Again, the bridge gateway structures with the lights that go over the bridge, decorative plaques that are in the bridge structures. And then we have a big paver walkway across the street. Immediately just south of the entrance drive to the bank, there's a big crosswalk that's all decorative pavers. There's a nice landing on the other side. There's the bridge up across the archway that crosses over the top of the path area that you pass through, the Riverwalk thing. There's a kiosk area in that particular space. There's overlooking. And now we get into a real urban context or a real hard-edged Riverwalk all along this space. If you can imagine now, we've got a continuous Riverwalk that is to a reorganized parking lot. Now we've gone to the parking lot, we've realized there's some underutilized areas here. We know there's numbers to match what they have today and what we would like to see work here. But as we walked through this whole idea and said, this is really the core, this is where you're really going to make a statement. This is where you can really make this thing work. It's really in this space right here. We saw an opportunity parking a single access point almost where it is today over in this area. The other access points where they are today roughly on what would be the east end and in the center along Shermer. This is a one-way drive coming in, two-way drive coming in here. These are all parking aisles that orient people when they get out of their car right to the back doors of all the buildings dressed up as part of this scheme. But this parking drive or this parking aisle runs along the entire length of the back. There is no more opportunity in this scheme to park cars up against our Riverwalk area with bumpers hanging over into the grass areas. There's no tires that are up on the edge or what have you. This is a serviceable, secured area where you can bring maintenance vehicles, where you can bring patrol cars, police patrol cars along this space. This is entirely lit with decorative street lighting, marching down the thing, all the decorative brick pavers along this space, and much more urban context, retaining wall structures as you go down to the river, really on both sides. There's also an opportunity here again with a waterfall structure that comes down off of this little corner here. We've dipped the river in or brought the river a little bit into the site there because we reorganized this space. We actually go down to the river on another level so that people are there walking up along the drive. Here, there's also a level down below that as well. You walk along a little bit further, a little overlook, a little riffle structure, a little further, you go down. One path of it, the brick paver path, stays up, hits at the corner, nice brick pavers crossing Shermer Avenue. The other one is a boardwalk that goes down to the water and goes underneath the bridge at that particular area. So, you know, big splash, big dollars in the center. This is where the Riverwalk gets an image, and people will remember this space when they think about the Riverwalk from Northbrook. This is, in this particular scheme, and I'll talk about it from the parking standpoint, we've lost 15 cars. We've picked up 6 additional cars to make us with a net loss of 9, but we've looked at the opportunity of actually narrowing down Meadow a little bit to create little bump outs and little parallel parking areas instead of having diagonal parking off of Meadow, which is an opportunity in itself, but a traffic concern in terms of backing cars into moving traffic. We've actually indented into that space all along this edge right here and actually provided for some parallel parking spaces along there that could really benefit this retail development on the east side. The point being that there's all kind of scrub material in there. There's a really wide setback in that zone, and there's a sidewalk in there. Well, move the sidewalk over, and you've got a lot of extra room to actually indent cars and get them out of the line of traffic so that you can keep your actual traffic movement the same. But we've got a nice, clean, straight Riverwalk. The lights marching down the thing, the banners flying. You come over here, and you've got the decorative bridge structures with the lights on, the plaques on them again. You come underneath the bridge, you're on the boardwalk still at this point, and that boardwalk comes back up and it meets the asphalt path right about here, about 200 or 300 feet south of Shermer. Along here, we've shown some vegetation, some reorganization, some plantings on the opposite side of the bank as well as on the park side of the bank. We come a little bit further south, again, the pedestrian lights coming down the river, little bench seating that looks out over the river along this area, but much more naturalistic, much more utilizing what's out there. I think in some instances we tried to widen the path to 10 feet to make it a little bit wider in that area and really kind of push the idea that this is where you can begin bike trail connection to this Riverwalk and then continue the bike trail on out towards the Meadow Hill area through local streets that would be marked as such. But really, again, we've got the archway down at the south end, we've got the decorative bridge features, and this is really where the Riverwalk stops at kind of at the historical museum. There's a lot of question as to how you reroute people and get them back onto the system or get them back through the system. One of them is to really sign this area and use the kiosk system that we've developed along the rest of the Riverwalk to tell people to get towards Meadow Hill or to the Aqua Park or back onto the trail at some other point in time. But it's real tough once you get past the south end to keep that momentum going that we've got on the north side because there's no space at that point. I'll really quickly... Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'll go back to the church. In this particular area, we've got, as you're up at the top, or if you're on the lower part of this path in this particular area, we've done a lot of clearing on the opposite side of the church side, but we've put a decorative metal fence or wrought iron, as people tend to call it, along the church side, much more in context with the church's image, but we've really opened up all the views from our Riverwalk into that cloister garden space that's back there. Obviously, something that has to be worked out with the church, but it could really be a benefit to everybody that there's something kind of nice back in this space. And it really de-emphasized the fact that you've got this shopping center backing up to the Riverwalk at that point. David's bringing up right now some of our little sketches, and these again are just rough ideas. They're not meant to be solutions or final things, but they're meant to give suggestions to some of the ideas that we talked about. The idea of some of these cross sections. This is cross section A right here. This is cross section B in this area. C. Cross section C right here, back of the shopping center. Everybody can see it. This is where the trucks are loading. Our screening wall, real steep embankment to some of our structural, thank you. The architect in the crowd has the pointer. We've got the sheet piling wall here on this opposite side. This may be gabion wall. This may be rock outcroppings, steep replanted slope, some new canopy trees. On this side would be the screening wall, and this would be the loading area on the opposite side. As you go across the river, as I was talking about, here's that lower boardwalk area. You're almost down by the river. You're off of the water 2 or 3 feet in this particular area. Then we got a lot of stone outcropping. We may have some structural walls in particular areas, but you get back up to the upper Riverwalk. That's that paved one with the promenade and the lights, and this would be that drive aisle that indicates the parking area that's immediately adjacent to it. So you can see there's a lot of stuff going on, a real short corridor of space, but this is really kind of where all the energy happens, right in this particular zone. This particular scheme right here is, let's see. Oh, that was C. That was A. Okay, A is up looking north towards the reading garden area. This would be the Metro side of the bank. This would be the replanted bank side. The Metro tracks would be up here, coming down to the bank, and this would be the little boardwalk area. Again, some lighting, a little overlook as you're looking up on the looking north off the Riverwalk across this bridge area right here, and then on the opposite side, typical little bridge crossing. There's that Metro bridge in the back side. This is reach 2. The bank side that goes up to the office building on the opposite side here, the tall office building. And you've got the walkway that we would suggest on what would be on the north side, about a foot head clearance in that area, and that's good in most instances. We've got that clear area, then you've got to traverse over the bridge, get to the opposite side of the bank, and at this point, this is where you start coming all the way back up again to Meadow Lane on that side. So we're trying to make reaches, meaning this portion to here, this portion to here, and then there are others, and then this portion all along the top here that are handicap accessible. There's clearly going to be some areas where you can't get with handicap. Those are the ones that go down to the river, especially on this opposite side over here. But we're trying to make instances where you can do each of the stretches of river in a wheelchair and not have to kind of go back on yourself to get to another one and get in a car to get to another point on the Riverwalk. We'll get more into that as we get further along. Ideas, a little kiosk, a little land and stone pier with a decorative light column and some sort of signage board, maybe a real simplified rooftop structure with a stone base and some sort of placard in it for a kiosk or a gateway. Here's typical railings that are out there. Maybe we paint them aqua color, or we paint them red, or we paint them some color that's part of the Riverwalk, so every time you see the bridge railing, it's painted the same color. Here's the piers. Maybe we do a little routing into them to get some relief, and then we put a cast plaque, whether it's a metal plaque, a painted plaque, whatever, it says Riverwalk on it. And we've got some little graphics here that just show ideas of how we can create some sort of identity or marketing campaign for Riverwalk. Little steel beam arch. Maybe there's a cast steel beam, laser cutout letters that say Riverwalk, and this is the portal that you walk through at all of these gateway opportunities that we talked about along the river. So these are just examples of ideas. We've also got, and we'll just lay them out later during discussion, ideas of, there's a million different materials, different palettes of streetscape elements. Those are all part of the Riverwalk. None of these are our idea. They're just meant to be examples of, there's 10,000 different lights we could use to the downtown. There's always some of the existing elements that are already in the downtown that we should be working with. Stone materials, some of the planting materials are out there. Those are all things we can work off of, but there are new elements that we can introduce to make the Riverwalk zone of the downtown different, especially the lighting, which could be a key element, and the pavers, the decorative pavers, whether they're brick, cobbles, whatever it is that works with the rest of the downtown area. Leave it for Nick to talk about the damage report.
The definition of rank having its privilege means the project manager gets to talk about the costs. What we've summarized here is the three basic concepts, and we've itemized the various cost items. You're all moving your eyes to the bottom lines here, so I'll take you there to begin with. Just to do the stream bank improvements, the erosion control measures, and the channel improvements that Tony described, we're estimating at this very preliminary level of study approximately $2.25 million for the half-mile reach of the river from Cherry Lane down to Walters. Now bear in mind that that is treatments on both banks, so we're actually talking about a mile of stream bank improvement for that figure. So on average, we're looking at about $400 per lineal foot of stream bank to do the basic river improvements in this reach. Overlaid on top of that are the two schemes then that Scott described. The Riverwalk premium, if you will, for the bare bones scheme adds about another $500,000 onto that basic river channel improvement cost. It's about $2.9 million for the channel improvements, the erosion control measures, and the bare bones basic Riverwalk that was presented. And then the concept C, the visionary scheme, we're estimating, again, very preliminary, just at the conceptual schematic design level, something on the order of about $4.5 million, which is roughly double the cost for just the basic river improvements. So we feel like these three schemes have bracketed from what's necessary at the minimal level to what's possible at the maximum level, and put in reasonable cost figures for the various improvements that were described. Just to take you through the intermediate concept, the stream bank stabilization and channel improvements, as I mentioned, is on the order of the $2.25 million. The Riverwalk itself, the pathway, is about $350,000. Plantings to go along with that, about another $100,000. Decorative fencing and stonework, roughly $75,000 to $80,000, and about $50,000 worth of very basic, almost just minimal safety lighting. To get to the maximum scheme, we put in a much more extensive and expensive Riverwalk. It's roughly double the cost of the basic for the walkway itself. This includes these various bridge elements and treatments to get down to the river. Some additional specially paved areas, these bump outs up by the library, for example. Street furniture, more extensive fencing and lighting, the gateway structures and whatever. Also, the parking lot improvements we've estimated at about $350,000 as well for the reconfiguration of the parking that Scott described. So that's That's what is included in the basic, or the most extensive scheme to get you up to about $4.5 million. We've talked for much too long. I apologize for going over our time here. We really do want to go to the workshop portion now and get your input and ideas on these different concepts. And John, could you just explain to folks how this is going to work?
Okay, great. We'll do a 2-second wrap up here, and then we'll take a stretch break. And I just want to do a couple quick things so you can get organized when you're taking a break here. This, if all came out, right? This is really what we're talking about. We've got the issues list going around. We want you to first think about issues. Did we get the issues that you have? Did we miss something? Did we not explain something? This is the same thing that you're getting handed out now. All the different pieces and problems that we're finding, things that are physical, that are environmental, that are infrastructure, as well as aesthetic and safety and security. We put at the end the downtown amenities question. Do we feel that the river is an amenity for downtown? If it is, then what should we do to make that amenity work for the downtown? So everybody's going to have the issues list. We first want to talk about that, and then go into the plans. And we got them all in order now. This magically all appeared. This is Plan A. What do we do to just fix up the river and make it work right now as a river system? Then Plan B, dress it up a little bit with Riverwalk. And Plan C, go to the visionary plan, as Scott said, to do the overlooks, the signage, and the Riverwalk. Okay, so think of the basics on through the whole system. So if we could take a 5-minute break, the first question is whether we need to break into groups, or are you more comfortable just staying like this and talking and asking questions once we come back from the break? Do we want to stay together a little bit? Want to do that? All right, 5-minute break, and we can look at these things while you're stretching, and then we'll come back to where you're sitting and we'll open it up.
Thank you.
Public meeting presentation like this, they had extra minutes to do it,
So don't worry about saying things you're not sure if it's right or whatever, let's just get it out there. We heard some questions up here that we will hold for now, and some ideas. So let's first, general questions, and we'll get it to the right person that's presented. Anyone want to have a question on the title?
Yeah. I have a concern about the use of the vinyl sheet piling from an aesthetic point of view and also the rock gabions. Whether they're, and maybe if you had a clear understanding of how that fits in with the structure and with the walkway, that would become more apparent, but also as to whether there are alternatives to that, because depending on whether you can see it or not, I would say they're the least desirable ways of stabilization, whether alternative would be like brickwork or attractive stonework or something like that.
Well, let me first repeat the question because they want to make sure.
This was a wide green space.
So it's like
Canadian Pacific.
Canadian CP.
Right, but they pay us to run.
So is that metro that we're doing?
Gonna possibly put the fiber optic keep right along the tracks all the way north.
If we start, getting the ball rolling, then
I guess it's a matter of doing it yet. I wouldn't, it's probably never too early to start writing some letters.
I think.
Can we get a permit to go underneath the thing?
Right, I mean, I that's the kind of thing we were talking about.
I see two issues with Metro. One is the other is the residential. Our friend, they come up with grant or something. Get in the parking lot. So one of them came up. They started. I'm selling pop. I mean, physically, it would make better. These are working on 50s. Then after, they got the referendum. See, Court got into business too late. We got into business after. They couldn't decide what they're doing. The library. What did they go? They didn't budget $75,000 to hold. You see the library? This is, see, what a lot of people either didn't vote at all, or talked into voting for this thing. And all of a sudden, we come up with this provision like this. And we had to go. You guys are all walking underneath it. That's inexactable. Everything, I don't care. Next time you go there tonight, I mean, it's my kind of, just take a look. It's a Canadian Pacific Adventure. It's a sewer line over there. It was a sewer line over here. They're real, I'm telling you, it really is. They're really. We don't know. Hundreds of people either come to train as tributary. We know so people want to drainage. Right. And 4:37, they go back and they live in this community. You see that it's full. This person, this train is natural. This is a beautiful part here. This is a nice thing. So this commercial you should be on the
Can you believe it? Okay. Do we need these back for? We need these back. Both are set. These two.
It's like, I got a lot up here. Thanks for coming, Joe.
You got a lot of things. Good time, and that you're interested in the agenda, I'm going to have a less of this.
Yeah, that's important. Yeah.
I don't know the difference between whether it will be successful or not. I'll touch your lead.
I'm going to go early.
Thanks.